Greetings, brave adventurers, and welcome back to the channel. It is I, Irix UK, and we are back with RPG A Day 2021. It's been a year since the last one, and I am looking forward to another month of cool vids. The first vid, the first word for the day, for the month, is scenario. And I pondered about this, and I wanted to share with you guys a favourite scenario of my past, and through that a favoured, shall we say, scenario format. Back in the day, let's just turn this screen off so I don't get the glare. There we go, that's much better, much more handsome. Back in the days of first edition AD&D, there were a couple of books which I picked up called the Book of Lairs. And the Book of Lairs were essentially one night, one-off scenarios, each one based around a specific creature. Each creature would get its own page entry. It would give you a rough sort of idea what character levels, and a couple of jumping off points for how to start the scenario. A couple of ideas, basically. You would then run through the basics, and if necessary there'd be a map. But most of the time it didn't bother about that. It was, they were kind of just jumping off points to get your gaming juices flowing and pick up ideas and so on. One of these, I think it was the first Book of Lairs, which was one of my favourite books. I wish I still had that now, actually. Had an entry for the Rust Monster. I'm sure you all know about Rust Monsters. I'm sure most of you have played D&D at some point, so I won't go into the description. But this scenario was designed for very low-level characters, and involved them basically coming into a village, and up in the hills of this village there was a grumpy old miserable dwarf, and he would come into town every week and he would pick up his supplies and he'd bugger off back into the hills. Very antisocial, but he hasn't been seen for a couple of weeks, and as much as the town folk didn't like him, they were curious what happened to him. So the adventurers get a few coins, maybe they get told they can stay a night at the inn or get a round of beers or whatever, if they'll just go check this dwarf's all right. And off they go. And the scenario idea is basically that the reason the dwarf lives out in the hills isn't because he's an antisocial old so-and-so, it's because he's breeding and selling rust monsters. And in this particular instance, shortly before he disappeared, he's fed them, he's locked them up, and he's gone off to visit some family somewhere. And just before the adventurers find his caves, the rust monsters, ever so hungry, have managed to break out of their wooden pens and start rummaging through the old caves and mines for something metal to eat. And what they've found is a metal lockbox containing metal potion bottles. So shortly as the adventurers arrive, not only have the rust monsters eaten through the metal lockbox, they've eaten through the metal vial containers, and they've ingested the magical potions within. So as I recall, you had 5 or 6 rust monsters, and one of them was invisible. One of them was shrunk down to the size of like an insect. Another one was in gaseous form. I think one had spider climb, another one had flight, and the like. And they've got these abilities, and they're still very, very hungry. And your adventurers have just walked in with their lovely metal armour and weapons and equipment. There was cool moments where it'd be like the invisible rust monster suddenly walks up to the party and bang, suddenly the chainmail armour disappears, converted to rust. The sword disappears. The what have you. Then you've got a miniaturized one which is crawling over you, and every little metal thing is disappearing, and you've got no idea why. And ultimately, when the party reel is going on, the dwarf turns up and goes, "Don't kill them. You know, they're not monsters. They're my livelihood. You need to help me round them up." And this is the scenario, and this is what makes it so good. The rust monsters in these weird magical format are very difficult to handle. And if you want to get the dwarf to basically replace any of the missing equipment, which is what he does as, you know, a thank you for rounding them up and not killing them, you've got to think outside the box, and you've got to right, eventually the potions are going to wear off, but you've got to round these things up before that happens, hopefully, or in some way get them there. And that always, when I've run this scenario, I don't know how many times now, 5, 6 times at least, with different groups, it works really, really well. It's very funny. It's a bit more light-hearted perhaps than normal, but that's what you want sometimes to make a really good scenario. It doesn't always have to be some dismal dungeon delve or political struggle or challenge across the plains. Sometimes it can just be round up some magically enhanced rust monsters. And I used to love running that scenario, and to the point that I could do it in my sleep now. It's very simple, it's straightforward. And it led to something that I used to do when I was running online games 20 years ago for D&D 3rd edition, on different sort of like, there were Java chats. I did things that were called monster hunts. You get players role-playing around, whatever, and I'd put up a little thing going, you know, adventurers wanted 4 to 5 players, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. And I had a list of all the creatures in the monster manual and the Fiend Folio, and I think I've still got that for Pathfinder first, so I might dig that up again. And whichever levels, I'd pick a creature, and I'd have it running rampage somewhere, and the adventurers are paid to go and deal with it. If it was something of a magical nature or whatever, or something summoned, planar, we had a really bad wizard NPC who was really awful, who would summon something and then go, I can't get it back in the box, and he'd get the adventurers from local tavern to come down and deal with it. And these became well known as monster hunts, and it's essentially the same idea as the Book of Lairs. Take a monster, come up with a location, come up with an idea of why someone's got to go there, roll up some treasure, and let the players just run with it, and just do a little session based around a specific creature. Because we all have these scenarios, and we all have these campaigns which are really well plotted out and planned out, but you can't just, you've got so many monsters available to us in the game, of our game of choice, that you'll never get to use half of them. But if you do something like this, you get to use some of those creatures you might never see in a normal campaign. And it only takes a session to do. And, you know, they're the sort of things that you can do in a 4 or 5 hour evening or an afternoon. And generally I find they go down really well with players because of that. It's just something different they're not used to. And you can have a bit more free-form leeway, shall we say. You're not constricted, confined to how a campaign or a published scenario says it runs. You just basically got a monster, a location, some treasures, and a plot. Bang. And I find that works really, really well as an idea for scenarios, especially if you've got to fill an evening slot for some reason. That's my topic for scenario, just a favourite scenario of mine, and how it led to a certain sort of play format I used to do online. I hope it's been somewhat interesting, and I hope you'll stick with me for the rest of the month for 2021 RPG a Day. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, and if you like the content, subscribe. It'd be really cool. And I recommend you check out other people online doing their RPG a Day 2021s, see what cool stuff they're coming up with. Right, thank you for watching, guys. Take care. Good gaming.